63 applicants stood beneath the chandeliers of the Harper House lobby, broad-shouldered, polished, each dressed in black. Then the revolving door turned, and Caleb Turner walked in with a worn canvas coat and salt-stained boots. Beside him, his 6-year-old daughter clutched a battered stuffed fox with mismatched button eyes. The laughter came before he reached the desk. Someone said he looked like a dad who had wandered into the wrong pickup line. Caleb didn't answer. He zipped his daughter's coat, told her not to draw on the leather chairs, and stepped onto the assessment floor. 27 seconds later, the largest man in the room was flat on the mat. Nobody laughed after that, not even Evelyn Harper, watching from the mezzanine, because the man they mocked would soon stand between her and everything her family had built. Before we begin, share the city you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if this kind of story speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe and be part of the journey. Now, let's get into it. The Harper House lobby held Chicago's winter light, like cold water trapped beneath glass. By 8:30 on Monday morning, the marble floor had already been polished to a mirror shine, and the tall brass doors kept breathing in little gusts of lake air whenever someone entered from Michigan Avenue. The air smelled of lemon wax, old money, damp wool coats, and the faint coffee bitterness drifting from the cafe tucked beneath the grand staircase. Above it all hung a chandelier wide enough to make smaller men look temporary. 63 applicants stood in 2 clean rows near the reception desk. Most wore black suits. Some wore tactical watches. A few had shoulders so wide their jackets looked more like warnings than clothing. They spoke in low voices and glanced at one another with the careful boredom of men who had spent years being paid to look dangerous. They had come to compete for one job: private security detail for Evelyn Harper, chief executive of Harper House Hotels, a family name stitched into Chicago like an old scar, elegant, profitable, and lately surrounded by too many quiet rumors. At 9 minutes before 9, the revolving door turned, and Caleb Turner stepped into the lobby with his daughter. The laughter did not come all at once. It started as one soft breath from the back row, then another, then a low ripple that moved across polished shoes and folded arms. Caleb did not look like the others. He was 38, maybe a little older if judged by the tired lines around his gray eyes. His dark hair was cut short without style. His beard looked 2 days past caring, and his face had the plain, weathered stillness of a man who had learned not to waste expressions. His coat was brown canvas, worn white at the cuffs. His boots had road salt dried along the soles. Beside him stood Emma, 6 years old, small and serious in a yellow knit hat, holding a stuffed fox by one ear. The fox had been loved nearly to baldness. One black button eye had been replaced with a blue one, giving it the look of a creature that had seen too much and still decided to stay. Victor Hale crossed the lobby before the registration clerk could speak. Victor was tall, in the clean, expensive way of men who spent time building their own reflection. His silver tie was perfectly centered, his hair was cut close at the sides, and his smile carried no warmth at all. As head of hotel security, he had arranged the morning with the pride of a man setting a table for his own victory. "You took the wrong elevator," Victor said. "Daycare is downstairs." More laughter rose from the rows. Caleb looked down at Emma and zipped her coat at the rest of the way to her chin. "Sit where I can see you. Don't draw on their leather chairs." Emma looked toward the waiting area, then back at him. "I'll try to respect the chairs." That almost made Caleb smile. Almost. It reached one corner of his mouth, then disappeared, as if some old hand inside him had closed a door. He signed in with no folder, no photograph, no letter of recommendation. The clerk asked for his resume. Caleb took a single folded sheet from the inside pocket of his coat and placed it on the desk. The paper held one phone number and one typed line: verification available upon request. Victor stared at it as though Caleb had handed him a grocery receipt. The first assessment was held in the ballroom beyond the lobby, where the tables had been removed and tape marks placed across the floor. A portable screen stood near the west wall. 3 hotel managers sat behind a long table, trying to look neutral and failing in 3 different ways. The applicants moved through the exercise one by one, each given 90 seconds of simulated footage from a hotel charity event and 30 seconds to identify. Most pointed at the obvious man near the bar. A few noticed the blocked exit. One former police officer caught the unattended bag under the buffet table and received a satisfied nod from Victor. When Caleb's turn came, he stood with his hands relaxed at his sides. He did not lean in. He did not squint. He watched the screen once. Then he pointed to the flower arrangement near the service door. The mirror behind it catches the east entrance, but not the stairwell. Anyone coming down those stairs has 4 seconds unseen. One of the managers stopped writing. Caleb pointed again, this time to a waiter carrying a silver tray. That tray is too steady for someone moving through a crowd. He is not serving. He is waiting. Victor's jaw shifted. And the woman near the window? Caleb continued. She touches her bracelet every time the principal turns away. That is either a signal or a habit. Either way, I would move the principal before finding out. The ballroom grew quieter than it had been all morning. Somewhere behind the partition, a coffee cup landed too hard on a saucer. On the mezzanine above the lobby, Evelyn Harper watched from behind the brass railing. She was 39, composed in a dark blue suit that made her look less dressed than armored. Her black hair was pinned at the nape of her neck, and the winter light made the tiredness beneath her eyes harder to hide. She held a pen over a legal pad, but she had not written a word since Caleb started speaking. Victor gave a thin laugh. Good imagination. Caleb stepped back from the tape mark. He did not answer. Some men defended themselves because silence felt like defeat. Caleb wore silence like an old coat that still fit. The second assessment was physical. The largest applicant left in the pool was a former college linebacker named Mason Cole, though no one needed his name to understand the room's expectation. He outweighed Caleb by at least 60 pounds and had the easy grin of a man used to smaller people making room. Victor announced the pairing without looking at Evelyn. A few phones came out. Emma had stopped coloring in the waiting area. She stood near the glass partition, the stuffed fox pressed to her chest, watching her father with the calm attention children reserve for storms they have survived before. Mason stepped forward first. His plan was visible in his shoulders. Close fast, grip high, crush backward. It had worked against 2 men already. The whistle sounded. Caleb moved 1 step to the side. Not backward, not away. Just 1 step, placed so precisely that Mason's right hand closed on empty air. Mason tried to correct. Caleb let him. The larger man came in harder, annoyed now, and that was the mistake. Caleb's left hand touched Mason's wrist. His right forearm shifted under the elbow, and his boot turned against the mat with a dry rubber whisper. Mason went down as if the floor had been waiting for him. No crash, no flourish, just a heavy body turned by its own force and set flat on the mat. Caleb released him immediately and stepped back. His breathing had not changed. He looked once toward Emma, not for praise, but to make sure she was still where he had left her. She lifted the stuffed fox a little, like a tiny flag over a battlefield. For the first time that morning, nobody laughed. Victor stood with his clipboard lowered at his side. The other applicants looked at Caleb differently now, but not yet with respect. Respect would have required them to admit they had missed something. For the moment, they only looked annoyed, as if the room had broken a rule without asking permission. Above them, Evelyn Harper lowered her pen. She had spent years sitting across from people who wanted something from her. Contracts, approval, money, access. They all leaned forward in some way, even when their bodies stayed still. Caleb Turner had not leaned toward anyone, not the judges, not Victor, not even the job. He had simply entered the room, taken the laughter without feeding it, seen what others missed, and put a larger man on the floor without anger. Evelyn looked down at the brown canvas coat, the salt-stained boots, the little girl with the ruined fox, and the man who stood 1 careful step from everything around him. Then she stopped looking at the file in her hand. She looked at him. By Tuesday morning, the Harper House no longer felt like a place Caleb Turner had entered by mistake. His name appeared on the security roster in black ink. His temporary badge had been replaced with a permanent one, and the front desk clerks had stopped looking at his coat before looking at his face. Some of the applicants from the tryout had disappeared before lunch the day before. A few others stayed for secondary positions under Victor Hale. They did not laugh when Caleb passed. Victor did not laugh either. That was not the same thing as respect. Caleb began work without ceremony. He arrived before sunrise, when the lobby lights still glowed low, and the cleaning crew moved carts across the marble with the soft rattle of bottles and folded cloth. The hotel smelled different at that hour. Less perfume, less coffee, more damp stone, brass polish, and the warm cotton scent of fresh laundry coming up from the service elevators. He walked the first 3 floors before Evelyn Harper came down from the executive suite, not because anyone asked him to, but because doors told stories before people did. One hinge on the west stairwell dragged half an inch before closing. The staff elevator paused longer on the 7th floor than the panel indicated. The doorman at the Michigan Avenue entrance touched his left sleeve every time a black sedan slowed near the curb. Caleb noticed all of it, filed it, and said nothing. Evelyn noticed the silence first, then she noticed the step. It began in the corridor outside the ballroom offices. She walked toward a breakfast meeting with 2 investors and a city official whose smile had the hard shine of a polished coin. Caleb followed behind her, not close enough to crowd her, not far enough to be decorative. When she stopped, he stopped. When she turned, he shifted before her shoulder completed the motion. In the elevator mirror, she saw him over and over in the same place. 1 step, not beside her, where people wanted to be seen, not 2 steps back, where hired help became part of the wallpaper. 1 step behind her right shoulder, steady as a metronome, quiet as snow accumulating on a window ledge. By the 3rd day, Evelyn stopped before the frosted glass door of the boardroom. The hallway was empty except for the 2 of them. Inside, voices were already waiting. The carpet swallowed sound, and the recessed lights above them laid pale rectangles across Caleb's face. "Do you count it?" she asked. Caleb looked at the glass, not at her. Close enough to be useful. She held the door handle without opening it. "Useful for what?" he answered after a beat. "To be in time." That should have satisfied her. It was practical, professional, exactly the kind of answer a person in his job might give. Instead, it landed in the hallway like a key dropped into an empty room. Evelyn opened the door and went inside, but for the next hour, she heard the words beneath the voices around the table. To be in time. At noon, the hotel moved into its practiced rhythm. Suitcases rolled over tile. A bell captain laughed too loudly near the revolving doors. Someone spilled espresso near the cafe, and the sharp smell of it followed Evelyn into the private elevator. Caleb entered after her, then took his place in the back corner, 1 step behind, even in a box too small to need distance. Evelyn watched him in the polished steel wall. His eyes did not rest on her. They moved once over the ceiling panel, once over the emergency stop button, once over the reflection of the hallway disappearing as the doors closed. He carried himself like a man who had been taught that peace was only a pause between things going wrong. Late that afternoon, the sitter called. Emma's after-school care had closed early because a water pipe burst in the building. Caleb took the call near the executive reception desk. Evelyn could not hear the whole conversation, only the change in his posture. His right hand went still around the phone. His jaw tightened once, then released. He did not ask for help. That was what made Evelyn look up. "Bring her here," she said. Caleb turned. "That is not necessary." "I know." Emma arrived 40 minutes later, with her backpack, her yellow hat, and the tired stuffed fox tucked beneath one arm. She did not run into the room. She stepped in carefully, studied the tall windows, the dark desk, the gray winter sky pressing against the glass, and then looked at Evelyn. "You need plants," Emma said. For the first time that week, Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. Evelyn looked around her office as though the absence had just been proven in court. "Apparently I do." Emma accepted a seat near the window. Someone brought printer paper and a paper cup full of crayons. The waxy smell of them warmed the corner of the office in a strange, small way. For 2 hours, while Evelyn moved through calls and Caleb stood near the door, Emma drew without complaint. Her sneakers swung above the carpet. The fox sat upright beside her like a badly qualified attorney. When the last meeting ended and the office fell quiet, Emma carried a drawing to Evelyn's desk. It showed a house with a blue roof, 3 figures, and a tree that leaned as though Chicago wind had reached even crayon country. One figure stood a little apart from the others. Evelyn touched the edge of the paper. "Why is he over there?" Emma looked down at the drawing, then toward Caleb. "Dad says if he stands too close, people disappear." The room changed, not loudly. Nothing broke. The glass of water on Evelyn's desk did not tremble. The city outside kept moving in strips of white headlights and red brake lamps below the windows. But Caleb's hand lowered from where it had been resting near the doorframe, and Evelyn saw something pass through his face too quickly to name. That evening, rain came instead of snow. It tapped on against the office windows in uneven fingers and turned the city lights into long, blurred lines. Emma fell asleep on the couch in the reception area, her cheek against the stuffed fox, one mitten still on. Evelyn stood by the window. Caleb remained near the door. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The heating system breathed through the vents. Somewhere beyond the wall, a copier started, jammed, and fell silent. Finally, Caleb said, "Her name was Rachel." Evelyn did not turn too quickly. He kept his eyes on the rain. "My wife, Emma's mother. 3 years ago, there was an accident. I was overseas. He gave her only that. No decoration. No plea for tenderness. Just the bones of a life broken cleanly in two. Evelyn understood that more details existed, but not all locked doors were meant to be opened with the first key that fit. She did not say she was sorry. People had said that to him enough, she guessed. They had probably placed it at his feet like flowers outside a closed church, then walked away relieved. So, she sat down in the chair across from the couch where Emma slept. Caleb looked at her once, as if measuring whether silence could be trusted. The rain kept touching the glass. And for the first time since Evelyn had hired him, Caleb did not leave the room just because the job no longer required him to stay. The morning after the rain, Chicago looked rinsed clean but not forgiven. Harper House woke under a hard silver sky, its windows catching the lake light in long, cold panels. Inside, the hotel moved with its usual grace. Luggage wheels over stone, elevator bells, low voices at the front desk. The faint smell of pressed linen and coffee left too long on a warming plate. To guests, it was luxury. To Caleb Turner, it was a map that had begun to change. The first wrong thing was Evelyn's schedule. A breakfast meeting appeared on her calendar under the name of a charity board she had not joined. The assistant at the executive desk swore it had been approved. Evelyn looked at the entry once, then at Caleb. He did not speak. He only took the printed sheet, folded it once, and placed it inside his coat. The second wrong thing came before noon. Mr. Alvarez, the night maintenance supervisor, was escorted out through the service corridor after 22 years at Harper House. He was a narrow man in his 60s with silver hair, careful hands, and the kind of posture older workers developed after decades of staying out of other people's way. His termination file said procedural violation. His locker contained 3 spare light bulbs, a thermos, and a photograph of 2 grandchildren taped inside the door. Caleb found him beside the loading dock, holding a cardboard box that looked too small for 22 years. "What did they say you did?" Caleb asked. Mr. Alvarez looked toward the security camera before answering. "They said I signed for keys I never touched." Caleb nodded once. He did not promise anything. Promises were easy things, and he had seen too many people use them like table flowers. Instead, he carried the old man's box to the curb and opened the taxi door for him. Mr. Alvarez paused before getting in. "Watch the East Service Hall," he said quietly. "Doors there have been closing funny." By late afternoon, the third wrong thing had a name attached. Richard Bennett. The name came printed on the corner of a purchase memorandum that should have been inside Evelyn's legal files, not lying half-visible beneath a stack of catering invoices in a conference room Victor Hale had used that morning. Richard Bennett was 62, a real estate investor with white hair, a permanent tan, and a public smile gentle enough to sell bad weather as sunshine. His photograph had appeared in business magazines beside hotels that no longer carried their original family names. The memorandum described an accelerated equity transfer. The language was soft, the intention was not. If signed under pressure, it would give Bennett's group enough leverage to cut Harper House into pieces and call the damage growth. Caleb read the first page standing up. Then he read it again, sitting down. The paper smelled of fresh toner and expensive cologne, as if whoever handled it last had wanted even the document to know he belonged upstairs. Caleb's thumb stopped on Evelyn's name. He set the page down very gently, the way a man sets down a glass after hearing it crack. He did not go to the computer room. He did not demand access logs. He walked. Through the kitchen, where the steam smelled of onions, butter, and dish soap. Through the laundry level, where sheets moved in white heaps and 2 women stopped talking when Victor's name came up. Through the staff hallway near the freight elevator, where a young porter admitted that service badges had been borrowed twice that week by men he did not recognize. Caleb listened more than he asked. Older workers trusted that. They trusted a man who knew how to hold a door, who said thank you without making it sound like performance, who did not look past them towards someone more important. By 6, he had enough pieces to dislike the shape. Victor stood too close whenever Richard Bennett called Evelyn's office. Not by much. Half a shoulder nearer than needed, just enough to hear what was not meant for him. But when a complaint came from accounting or a question from legal, Victor drifted back, unavailable in the exact moment responsibility required a witness. Evelyn saw Caleb watching him. That evening, the executive floor emptied slowly. The lights dimmed one row at a time until the hallway felt longer than it was. Outside the windows, clouds gathered low over the city, and the first wind before snow pressed against the glass with a soft, steady hand. Evelyn stood near the elevator bank, arms folded. "Caleb," she said, "why always one step?" He looked at the brass elevator doors. Their reflection held both of them, her in front, him behind, the same old distance between them. The elevator machinery hummed somewhere deep in the wall. "Rachel called before the accident," he said. Evelyn did not move. "My phone was on silent. I was pulling a family out of a building overseas. I saw the missed call later." His jaw shifted once, then stilled. "I was saving someone else." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. Neither of them got in. "You didn't kill her," Evelyn said. "No." Caleb kept his eyes on the closed doors. "But I wasn't there." That was all he gave her, not because there was no more, but because the rest had lived too long inside him to come out cleanly. Evelyn let it stand. The space between them felt less like a rule now, and more like a wound that had learned geometry. At 9:15, Caleb returned to the security office alone. The room smelled of dust, warmed by old monitors. On the desk sat the day's printed room use report, delivered late by someone who usually delivered nothing late. Caleb turned the pages slowly. Ballroom A had been reserved for Friday morning under a neutral title, Strategic Governance Session. He checked the attached attendee list. Shareholders, legal observers. Victor Hale listed as security lead. Evelyn's approval line blank. At the bottom, in small print, was the hosting request. Grand ballroom, full privacy, no staff access during session. Caleb sat back. Outside, beyond the service window, snow had begun to fall over Chicago, thick and quiet, covering the streets before anyone could decide whether to call it a storm. The grand ballroom had been built for weddings, galas, and men who liked to make bad news sound expensive. By 9 on Friday morning, the chandeliers were already burning above the long walnut table, their light breaking into bright pieces across water glasses, silver pens, and folders thick with prepared conclusions. Snow moved past the tall windows and white sheets, muting Chicago until the city seemed far away and unable to help. The room smelled of warmed carpet, stale coffee, wool coats drying too quickly, and the sharp ink of documents printed before dawn. Evelyn Harper sat at the head of the table. Caleb stood one step behind her right shoulder. He had not slept much. The night had left a dull weight behind his eyes, and a tightness across his back that did not come from age or old injuries. On the wall across from him, a gold-framed painting of the original Harper House looked down on the room like an ancestor too polite to scream. Richard Bennett opened the meeting with a smile. He looked exactly like his photograph had promised. White hair combed smooth, winter-tanned skin, dark suit, soft voice. Nothing about him seemed hurried. That was the first warning. Men who knew they were stealing rarely rushed when they believed the door had already been unlocked for them. "We are all here because we care about the future of this institution," Richard said. Evelyn did not move. Victor Hale stood near the side entrance with a tablet in one hand and a radio clipped to his belt. He looked professional, attentive, useful. To most of the room, he looked like security. To Caleb, he looked like a man listening to two conversations at once. Richard continued. He spoke of stewardship, market pressure, shareholder duty, and necessary transitions. His words were covered in velvet. Beneath them, Caleb heard the blade. A folder was passed down the table. Then another. Someone cleared his throat. A woman near the far end adjusted her glasses and looked at Evelyn with apology already arranged on her face. Evelyn opened the folder in front of her. Caleb saw her fingers stop on the signature page. Not shake. Stop. Richard leaned back slightly. The terms are unfortunate only if we mistake sentiment for leadership. That was when Victor touched his earpiece. A small motion. 2 fingers. Left hand. Too quick for the table to notice. Caleb noticed. The east service door opened without a sound. 2 men entered in dark coats, not hotel staff, not shareholders. Their shoes were wrong for the service hallway. Clean soles, no salt, no kitchen scuff, no hurry. One moved toward the wall panel near the rear exit. The other shifted toward Evelyn's left side, pretending to check his phone. Caleb's hand closed once, then opened. For 1 second, Rachel's missed call flashed somewhere behind his ribs. Not as memory, as impact. Then the room moved. Richard placed a pen beside Evelyn's folder. You can protect the name, or you can lose everything fighting for the walls. Victor stepped from the side entrance. Ms. Harper, we need to move you for a private discussion. Evelyn looked up. No. Victor reached for her arm. Caleb did not stay behind her. The distance broke so quietly that no one understood its meaning until he was already beside her, shoulder aligned with hers, body placed between her and Victor. The old rule, the one step, the measured grief, the border he had kept like a fence around a burned house, vanished under the harder law of the moment. Victor's hand met Caleb's forearm instead of Evelyn. "Step back," Victor said. Caleb did not. The first man from the service door came fast. Caleb turned just enough to meet him, caught the wrist, drove him into the edge of the service cart, and heard silverware scatter across the carpet in a bright, frantic rain. The second man reached the wall panel. Evelyn stood, swept the folder off the table, and slid it toward the shareholders before Richard could stop her. "Read the last page," she said. Her voice cut through the room better than a shout would have. Victor struck Caleb from the side. Pain flashed through Caleb's left shoulder, hot and immediate. His hand went briefly numb. He lost half a step, recovered against the table, and knocked over a glass. Water spread across the polished wood, carrying black ink from somebody's notes into a thin gray river. Victor grabbed Evelyn's wrist. Caleb moved without enough breath to think. He caught Victor at the elbow, turned in close, and drove him down against the table edge hard enough to break the tablet screen. Victor tried to rise. Caleb locked his arm and held him there. "You're hired help," Victor hissed. Caleb looked at him. His shoulder burned. His hand still had no feeling. "No," he said. "Today I'm the man who stayed." At the far end of the table, an older shareholder had reached the last page. Then another. The papers began moving faster. Caleb had placed copies where they would be found if the meeting turned, and now they turned. Access logs, forged approvals, a transfer memo with Richard's people named too early, and the quiet proof that Evelyn had never authorized the session. Richard's face did not change all at once. It emptied slowly, like a room after music stops. The hotel's internal security team entered through the main doors 2 minutes later, led by 2 staff members who had worked under Mr. Alvarez for years and had decided, at last, which man they believed. Victor was taken from Caleb's hold. The 2 strangers were pinned near the service entrance. Richard Bennett stood without being asked, smoothed his tie, and surrendered the room the way men like him surrendered anything, as if it had been a misunderstanding beneath their dignity. The danger passed in pieces. First the door was secured, then Evelyn's wrist was checked, then the shareholders began speaking over one another in low, frightened voices. The chandelier kept shining above them, as though light had no moral preference. Caleb stepped away from the table. His shoulder had stiffened. A dark line of blood marked the torn seam of his shirt, small but bright enough for Evelyn to see. He held his left arm close, breathing evenly through his nose. Too evenly. "Caleb," Evelyn said. He looked at her. For a moment, the room disappeared from her face. She saw what no one else had time to see. Not pain, not victory, not even fear. His right hand trembled once before he pressed it flat against his thigh. He had stood beside her, and it had cost him more than his shoulder. The hospital corridor was warm, yellow, and tired in the way only hospitals become after midnight. Snow tapped softly against the windows at the end of the hall, more sound than weather now. The city outside had gone quiet under it, but inside, life kept moving in small, stubborn ways. Rubber soles on waxed floors, a distant phone ringing twice and stopping, the dry click of a clipboard being set down, the faint smell of antiseptic, coffee from a vending machine, and clean cotton pulled from sealed drawers. Caleb Turner stood in the doorway of the exam room with his left shoulder wrapped in white gauze beneath a borrowed shirt. The doctor had called it manageable. The word had made Evelyn Harper look at Caleb for half a second longer than necessary, as if she had begun to understand that manageable was one of those words men used when they did not want anyone asking where it hurt. Caleb had not argued with the doctor. He had not argued with Evelyn when she drove. He had not argued when the nurse told him to sit down. He had simply stood up again as soon as no one was looking. Across the hall, Emma slept on a narrow waiting bench with Evelyn's coat tucked over her legs. Her yellow hat had slipped crooked over one ear. The old stuffed fox rested beneath her chin, its mismatched button eyes pointed toward the ceiling, as though keeping watch in Caleb's place. Evelyn sat beside the bench, one hand near Emma's shoulder, but not touching, careful in the way people are careful around something they have not earned yet and still want to protect. Caleb watched them from the doorway. One step would have been too close. 10 feet was easier. The police had taken Victor Hale before the ambulance lights finished painting red across the hotel windows. Richard Bennett had left with 2 officers and the expression of a man already drafting a statement through his lawyer. Harper House was still standing. Evelyn still had her name, her company, and the truth placed in enough hands that it could not be quietly buried by morning. Those were facts. Caleb trusted facts. It was the softer things that had always ruined him. Evelyn looked up and saw him standing there. She did not ask him to come closer. That was why he nearly did. Then Emma shifted beneath the coat and opened her eyes. For a moment, the child looked confused. Then she saw Caleb in the doorway. "Dad?" Her voice was small and rough with sleep. "I'm here." Emma blinked at him, then frowned with the deep seriousness of a 6-year-old judge returning to a case left unfinished. "You're far again?" Caleb did not move. Evelyn lowered her eyes, giving him the mercy of not watching too closely. The hallway seemed to grow quieter around the child's words. Even the vending machine hum became a small, steady river. Emma pushed herself up on one elbow. The fox slid into her lap. "Mom wouldn't be mad at you." Caleb's hand closed around the doorframe. "She knew you always tried to come home," Emma said. No one had told her to say it. That was what made it land where no adult sentence could have reached. Adults chose words for the wound they wanted to close. Children simply named the room they were standing in. Caleb looked at his daughter, and for one clear second he was not in a hospital hallway in Chicago. He was in every doorway he had ever failed to cross in time. The phone screen lighting up too late. The silent apartment after the funeral. Emma at 3 years old holding a cereal bowl with both hands, because she did not yet know what grief was, only that the house had grown too quiet. Then Emma yawned. The spell broke gently, almost kindly. Caleb let go of the doorframe. He crossed the hallway and sat on the edge of the bench beside her, not behind, not at a safe angle, beside her. Emma leaned against his uninjured side, as if the whole matter had been obvious from the beginning. Evelyn stayed where she was. For a while, the three of them said nothing. The corridor light buzzed softly overhead. Snow gathered on the outside ledge of the window. Caleb's shoulder hurt in slow pulses, but his breathing had stopped obeying the old rhythm of threat and exit. Evelyn finally spoke. "Are you all right?" Caleb looked at his hands. There was dried antiseptic at the base of one thumb, pale against the skin. He rubbed it once, then stopped. "No," he said. Evelyn nodded, accepting the answer as complete. After a moment, Caleb added, "But I don't think I have to stand outside my own life anymore." Emma had already fallen asleep again before he finished speaking. Her head rested against him. The fox lay crooked across her knees, still keeping its shabby watch. Evelyn reached down and pulled the coat higher over Emma's feet. Caleb did not step back when her hand brushed his. Morning came quietly. By then, the city had begun its ordinary work again. Tires hissed through slush. A bus sighed at the curb. The hospital lobby smelled of new coffee and wet wool. Evelyn signed the last discharge form while Caleb stood beside Emma, not scanning the room so much as noticing it. There was a difference. He could feel it in his shoulders. Outside, the sidewalk wore a thin skin of snow, not enough to stop anyone, just enough to show where people had been. Emma walked between them, holding Caleb's hand with one hand and her fox with the other. Evelyn fell into step on Caleb's left, careful of his shoulder. For half a block, none of them spoke. Then Caleb looked down and saw the old pattern his boots had made behind him. Deep, measured, alone. Ahead, Emma's smaller prints wandered in uneven little moons, and Evelyn's steps kept pace beside his. Rachel was still gone. That would not change. Some griefs did not leave the house. They only learned to sit by a different window. But Caleb did not fall back. He walked beside them, and the one-step distance disappeared into the snow behind him. Sometimes, the miracle is not a flash of light from heaven. Sometimes, it is quieter than that. It is a tired man choosing to stand one more time. It is a child saying the one sentence no adult was brave enough to say. It is God placing the right person in the right hallway, at the right hour, when someone else is about to lose everything. Caleb did not get his old life back. Rachel was still gone. The wound was still there. But by the grace of God, the wound no longer owned him. And maybe that is one of the quietest miracles of all, when the past does not disappear, but it finally stops holding the keys to your future. In everyday life, many of us carry a distance of our own. One step behind love, one step behind forgiveness, one step behind the life we are afraid to live again. But perhaps God does not always ask us to leap. Sometimes, He only asks us to take one honest step closer. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope tonight. Leave a comment and tell us what you believe Caleb's story means. And if you want more stories about courage, family, loss, and grace, subscribe to the channel. May God bless you, protect your home, heal what still hurts, and give you the strength to take your next step.